this today. I really appreciate it. Can you describe the show for viewers? Can you kind of give everyone a heads up as to what it is and
Okay. Before I start, yate, Sierra and Jana tabahe nishle, nakaidinet bashishi, twahaglini chiche do nakaidinet additionally. My name is Sierra. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I am Edgewater, born for the Mexican people. And I'm also the showrunner of Rutherford Falls. The show is about two best friends, Nathan and Regan. Regan is played by the lovely Jana Schmieding, who's here. And they've been lifelong best friends who both care deeply about their family histories, specifically Regan caring very much about her culture as a Native woman. And they find sort of their friendship and really the whole kind of town dynamic sort of put to the test when there is a reckoning, a historical reckoning that happens in the town. And sort of there's like bigger issues that the show touches on. It's very funny, but it also is really centralized by, I think, these sort of everyday interactions that you have with friends where you may have different histories, but you still care deeply for each other, and sort of the larger kind of issues kind of impacting personal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I always describe the show as like the story of two friends in a small town and the way in which when someone's historical narratives are challenged, uh, you know, sort of depicts how that manifests between these friends and also personally within these characters and also in the town of Rutherford Falls, a small town. So both the Nathan Rutherford's history is challenged, and we see whether or not he wants to dig his heels into protecting it or sort of grow and learn, and that's at least what the first season is about.
so what are your origin stories? How did you get into this world of entertainment?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Oregon and was very interested in the performing arts, and also was a person who was taught very early on to be outspoken about my indigeneity and my nativeness in largely white spaces. And so the I was kind of a theater nerd in high school, and then into college, I studied theater arts and performing specifically, and got involved in comedy in college through improv. And my literacy and outspokenness about my nativeness and organizing, and my love of performing arts sort of merged, and I was trying to keep them merged throughout the course of my, I guess my studies, because when I moved to New York after college, I sort of just jumped into studying comedy. I was also a teacher for a decade in New York City to make money so that I could study comedy, because it requires money to, pursue a hobby of any kind. And so, yeah, I was really ultimately took my comedy learning and moved to Los Angeles in 2016 on the heels of a Trump election, and wanted to write for myself and write for Native women. And eventually I met Sierra, and she read my writing samples and staffed me. So it really has been sort of like the apex of a lot of my personal work has sort of happened in this show.
Were the performance arts and comedy, were those something that was in your household?
I have a very funny family, very funny mom and auntie. My dad's very funny too. I mean, I was a kid who grew up like we always had a video camera in the house, and so my siblings and I were always making like parody commercials and goofy videos, and I was also like a young storyteller. My grandfather, who is passed now, was a person who he was like, he would just like turn the video camera on and record like hours of Christmas time present opening, and it's just not interesting, but he like really cared about and he would also take, when we would visit our family on the reservation, like we would he would go out into the community and record elders' stories and capture these really important stories that would potentially go untold. And so I follow in his footsteps a great deal, and wanting to learn the stories of my people, and also to tell my own stories and do it in a creative way.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear where are you the ignored child who needs to act out, or are you the one who has parents who are always kidding around and you're just part of the fun?
I'm definitely the middle child who got the middle child between an overachiever and a sick kid. So yeah.
You're gonna notice me.
Notice me, and aren't you now?
Sierra, can you tell me about your origin story? I kind of see you as superheroes. That's why I say it's origin horror story, because I think it's great, and I think and I think people are going to see that. Many people are going to see you as in that way, fighting the negative things in this world, coming out and breaking down barriers and making change. And it's a sitcom. Someone say, oh, it's a sitcom or it's a movie. People always dismiss it. I'm like, those are the most effective things, because those are the things that allow you to see through the eyes of others, and in ways you couldn't, especially when it's told by the people whose story it is. So I'm sorry, I'm talking more than you are, but if you can you tell me about?
I love it. You call them superheroes.
Can you tell me your origin story?
Yeah, I was born in Phoenix, raised in Tucson, Arizona. My mom and dad, my mom's an artist. She's a master Navajo tapestry weaver. She is like the LeBron James of Navajo weaving. She's very well known in that sort of arena. So we grew up like in museums. She did like a residency at the British Museum. So I like hung out around the Rosetta Stone and like befriended all the security guards. And so we kind of had this sort of weird vagabond life until my mom put my dad through pharmacy school. And so it was sort of hand to mouth until I was, I don't know, early teens, a tween, and then it became like suburbs, and it was very suburban. So it was like a suburban native for a while. But my family, just same with Jana. I think native families are much funnier than people anticipate. I think that there's so many different, obviously we're not a monolith, or many different nations, but there's so many shared experiences we had in the writer's room of cutting up and teasing. And there's just some sort of like cultural kind of systems that create humor. And so my family really loved comedy. My dad wanted to be a stand-up, and he kind of, I think, fell for my mom because she was so funny. And so comedy was really rewarded in our house. If you were funny, you kind of got out of trouble. And I just always loved TV and movies. Like Arizona's so hot. It's like 120 degrees in the summer sometimes. So we would just stay indoors. And my mom, kind of weaving and being sedentary, we were like binge watching before that was a thing. So I grew up watching like whole seasons of TV in 2 days. And so that sort of lended itself to working at the Smithsonian. I worked at the National Museum of the American Indian for many years as a film programmer. So I got to watch films and write about films. And I'd always was dying to make movies and television, but I think I was a little scared of kind of taking that leap. And then I ended up taking a couple of classes that were sort of these sort of incubators to get you into these sort of diversity programs. Broke up with my very nice boyfriend, put all my stuff in storage, came out to LA, ended up getting into the Disney Fellowship, and was placed on a show called Happy Endings. And that was sort of my first writer's room experience. Luckily, that show went on for 3 seasons, so I was able to kind of leapfrog out of the hell I think a lot of diversity writers get, where they have to be staff writers for a long time. It was really just a great place to learn how to be a showrunner. And there's so many things I took from that show that we used in Rutherford Falls. It was just a great foundation. And then worked on a lot of single season shows, worked on Superstore for a few years, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then through working with Mike and Ed, got reconnected and started developing Rutherford Falls. And then that's where I met Jana. I was on her podcast. And I feel like Jana is being very modest in calling her comedy career a hobby, but like she made so many funny videos in New York that when we were watching them, because everyone sends, your sample, but a lot of other things, and you're so sick of reading samples. So it's fun to watch like short videos or read like a short, play or something. And we were like howling with laughter at the characters that she had created and the stuff that she had done. And it was just so cool to see, like, there were so many native writers and actors that I did know, but to see someone like Jana, who I just had never heard of, was just phenomenal.
do you have any advice for people who are looking to get into these careers, both acting and writing?
I mean, I started 10 years ago when the environment in writers' rooms was so different. Like the writers' rooms I was in for the time were very progressive, but even in the time, it was very much like these diversity programs would tell you, like, if someone makes an offensive joke, like say something twice as offensive. It was like prison rules. It was like stab the biggest guy in the yard or something. And like that's how you survive. And so sometimes you kind of had to really carry yourself with a lot of steeliness, and not let it get you down, which is a lot of comedy rooms anyway, and over time, I feel like I've seen it get a lot better in that, like, I've never been the only woman in a room. I've definitely been the only brown woman in a room. I've definitely only, it's usually me and a black male writer and then a bunch of white dudes is like what it was for a while, um, and then it just slowly started to get better and the story started to change. So sometimes like my advice for new writers is, so it's like trying to tell you how to use like a VCR or something, because it's like the things have changed so much. But I do think it's like the more you can hold on to your own voice, the more you can recognize what the showrunner needs and really solve problems and facilitate, the more you can write samples that really play to your strengths and are like these sort of examples of this is what I'm good at, the easier it is to slot you into a room, and just to try to be the most authentic version of your comedic self, of your storytelling self. So if you're a joke person, be there for the jokes. If you're a story person, be there for the story. And then slowly over time, you'll get good at all of the stuff, would be
So
my
kind of retain your identity is kind of.
Yeah, because eventually you will get a show and you'll have to remember what your voice is. And it's harder than you think it is because you've been so trained to write in other people's voices. So it's like, get good at that. And when you're at work, do that. But then when you're not at work, make sure to be writing your own stuff and because that's what will jump off the page, as you try to get hired.
How about for you, Jana? What were some of the challenges you had breaking in?
Well, I had a lot of challenges. I'm not really sure the source of them, other than just being a woman and being a Native woman. I don't. When I started, I've been making comedy independently for over a decade, and collaborating with friends and just making web series and stuff. And so that I, like Sierra said, like, it's nice to have a little bit of a digital portfolio of like just random little things that are goofy and are in my voice. And I also got the opportunity when working on my own comedy independently to hone my voice and to develop it and to find what I think is funny for me, and to try crazy stuff, really wild, weird comedy, and have different like eras of my comedic aesthetic, and then slowly sort of find where I'm at now. But when I started writing, comedy samples to attempt to get staffed and be a writer in a room, I really, I was submitting myself for all of the diversity programs and all of the all the fellowships, all the festivals, and I got rejected from all of them. And so I knew that there couldn't be that many Native people, like, submitting samples. Not that like I expected them to pick a token Indian for their programs, but it was defeating. It was really hard after a while. I mean, at first I was like, I don't even care. Whoever, I just want people to read my work and like see my byline. Like, that's all I care about. But eventually, in late 2019, right before Sierra told me that I got staffed, or my manager told me I got staffed on Rutherford Falls, I was ready to turn in, throw in the towel on the endeavor, because it just seemed like the industry wasn't really ready for stories about Native women. So
I think when people read samples or they meet with people, they're always looking, there's an inherent bias that I don't think even the most kind person isn't aware of, where they're like, oh, you went to Harvard, I went to Harvard, or, oh, you're in a button-down shirt and I'm in a button-down shirt. And when you are a Native person and there's been so much erasure in your story and your history, it is very difficult to kind of leapfrog over all of that. I have to teach you about the history of Indigenous people before I can even tell you like where I'm from or where I went to college. Like, there's so much that you have to fill in on top of trying to get the job, that it can just be really hard. It's hard to get that script picked. It's hard to get that meeting. And then even once you get that meeting, people are confused as to like your background or where you came from, because there's so little for them to hold on to. And so much of it is trying to like quickly make those links of like, I'm suburban, I'm this, because you know, and you can do it from any location, but it's really difficult, I think, to articulate how Native people, especially in Hollywood, need like the benefit of the doubt. That it's like, it might not happen in this hour meeting, but I'm telling you that I can do this, and I'm telling you my stories are interesting. And like, so that's why I'm so proud, and I think we're so proud to make Rutherford Falls, is because like the goal is not only to have this show be funny, which is the main goal, but also to make it easier for the next Native person that's trying to tell their story.
Yeah, I think culturally, you know, right, this has been like the challenge, I think, for a lot of Native content creators, is there's just a general lack of literacy about Native issues, Native history, Indigenous people living in contemporary times. And so Rutherford Falls has the added benefit of sort of building a little bit of literacy for people and seeing us as humans and seeing our internal lives and how we are in community and how we are with each other, so that we can get used to seeing Native people and Native stories on TV.
Yeah. And it's funny and it's entertaining and it's good. You know what I mean? It's not like homework. It's funny.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, that how well it kind of fills the canvas. What we know are just a few paint strokes, but we have, you know, this massive canvas that should be full of strokes and colors and textures, and it's just not there. And this, you know, episode by episode, I find myself like taking in a little bit more, and like you said, it's delivered through comedy, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, and that's for like everyone, you know what I mean? It was really important to us to not have any like heroes or villains. Like on any given Sunday, each one of those characters is someone's ally and someone's adversary. Each person makes the decisions they think are best based on their, you know, range of knowledge. But what we didn't want to do is be like, these people are bad and these people are good. You know, it's more having that conversation that's reflective of, you know, our lives that we're living right now.
Because you avoid going into caricatures. How did you avoid crossing over that line to keep these, you know, kind of you know, more layered and complex characters throughout the series?
I think we had a diverse writers' room that reflected a lot of the different personalities that you see on the show. So just when we would kind of veer into, you know, homework, someone would pull us back, or, you know, something would be like, well, that's the funniest version, so we have to make this work in terms of the story. So there's just so much constant calibration on any TV show. And then also having, you know, including myself, 5 Native writers in the room, if it made all of us laugh, or we found it all interesting, or it created some kind of debate, we would sort of extrapolate that. And, you know, the different writers of color, different white writers would say like, oh, we have a version of that. I have that in my family, or I do that. And you're like, okay, so then it's kind of interesting on a broader level. But even if it wasn't, we would still chase it and try to figure out. So even if it was something that wasn't immediately something that a broad audience could identify with, what's the funniest version of this? Because funny is always funny. Or what is the most interesting, twisty, turny way to do this? And so it was really about trying to calibrate all of these sort of different needs at the same time. And so if it made us laugh, or if we found it interesting, we kind of just trusted that and chased that story.
You're the showrunner, and then we have 3 co-creators. Is that the Mike Scheer, Ed Helms, and yourself? What was the collaboration like, and what were your goals when you originally started creating this show, and how did they evolve to where they are now?
Yeah, so I think Jana and I have both experienced this, where oftentimes Native writers will get a call being like, hey, we made this movie, we're about to make this movie in a day. Can you read the script? It has Indians in it. Tell us it's okay. Or it's like, and you're like, no, like it's not, no. And it's just a bummer. And you wish you could have been there on the ground floor so that you could have told them why certain things needed to be a certain way, or why this could be a better or funnier thing to do. And luckily, like, this was the opposite of that. It was Mike and Ed kind of calling me at the beginning, like, we have sort of half an idea. Can we pitch it to you? We think it has Native content in it. What do you think? And so after that initial meeting, I brought in all of my sort of museum knowledge and my experience as a Native woman working in a lot of white spaces, and we just started talking. We talked for almost a year before we pitched it. We're really just honing and crafting, and I was like, oh, you need this character, and they were like, oh, could they also do this, and we're like, yes. And we was just we were just cooking. It was really wonderful where they began and we ended. It just, you couldn't tell at a certain point. And then really there was a big conversation about this thing called the backfire effect, which is this weird hiccup in human psychology where if you are presented with information that goes against a core belief of yours, you will not only not accept it, you will double down. So it's why there's like anti-vaxxers. It's why we have the political system we do. It's why like I can't let go of certain musicians. It's like, and so everyone does it, and we can see it in other people, we can't see it in ourselves. And we thought like, well, that is just a perfect way to talk about America, to talk about American history, because we're all capable of these blind spots. And so really it was chasing that, like, who is a character like Nathan Rutherford, who is the sort of embodiment of the backfire effect, and just really can't let go of these things that like define who he is, and how does that impact his actual, emotional relationships? How does that impact the town? And then also, are there backfire effects in other characters? And you see it in like the Josh character, where he goes in with a real belief of who Terry Thomas is, and really can't let go of that until finally Terry has to turn off the recorder and break it down for him. That everyone kind of has the ability to do that, even if Josh is very, very nice to Regan's character. And so, yeah, a lot of it was the backfire effect, talking about, by clinging to these historical narratives, what narratives are lost, what Native stories are lost, what Native histories are lost. And then also just like, this stuff is messy, right? Jana? I mean, I was like, just like the recognition that this stuff is messy was really kind of, personally, like one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about, and that as a group we wanted to really exhibit.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we were exploring the idea of holding many truths at once, and what that looks like within the lives of characters.
So Jana, you came on as a writer, you became the lead. How does that happen? That's a story in itself.
Yeah, it has been truly a wild year for me, and coming, being a staff writer was truly plenty for me. I was very much like, I have a job. Oh my God. I was so surprised and delighted. And also to be working on a show with other Native people, and like sitting in a room with all of these experienced like writers. I mean, getting to learn from Sierra and Ed and Mike Schur. I was just like, what's happening to me? This is absolutely magical. So I really felt like I had rubbed a genie out of a lamp in that situation. But Sierra didn't mention, wanting to cast me, or, there was truly no talk of it in the room. And we were, I was, as writers, we were, able to see like who was coming in for auditions. And there were just all of these like amazing Native actresses that I saw coming in for reading for Regan, and I was like, ooh, we're gonna get a Regan soon. And and these are all women that I've seen like on the stage and screen, and that was really wonderful. And I was originally thinking I was gonna audition for the role of Sally, who is, of Wayne and Sally, the two casino employee bullies. And I was really excited about that. But when Sierra emailed the sides the night of before the audition or the reading for Sally, she also included sides for Regan. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a swing here. So I was sort of like, it was like, okay, I think that maybe she wants me to try it out, and gave it my best shot. And got the opportunity to read for Allison Jones, which was like already just an amazing experience. And I really felt like, gosh, they're really doing me a solid here. These, my EPs are like so nice to introduce me to a casting director. It's just like all these things. But I really had packed up the dream of performing when I got the writing job, because I was like, I'm entering this industry as a writer. Like, I want to be a storyteller. And I don't think that I'm going to get hired to be an actor, even though it's like sort of my first love. you know, in terms of my love of art and performing arts. And yeah, then I kept going through the process and did, you know, screen tests with Ed, 2 different screen tests with Ed. And on the second one, on the way to the screen test, I crashed my car. um Sierra came and picked me up, and we abandoned my car
You
on the
did.
side of the road and
We
went
gave the cops like 10 minutes and I was like, we gotta go. You have a screen test. We gotta go.
So yeah, I, you know, through Sierra's like confidence in me, and you know, her like, you know, pulling me up, I really felt like I was like, I have to do this. I'm like gonna execute this. And I just employed all of my um comedy skills that I had been, you know, honing. I didn't know it was for this, but I had just been working on it for many years, and I was able to, you know, put them to work.
I love our cast so much. And obviously, like, Ed is a comedy icon and just incredible. And Michael Gray is one of the most amazing actors. And so is Ed. I mean, they're just great across the board. Everyone,
Mhm.
Dustin. But the part of Regan is so complicated because she has to have real chemistry with 3 very different people. So she has to have that sort of mentee relationship with Terry. She has to have a genuine friendship where you feel like she's been friends with this person forever, who is going to go on to do some pretty unlikable stuff. And then she has to have real romance with Josh and have this sort of like kind of budding romance. And it was very hard to find someone who could do all 3 of those things and be really funny. And I think, you know, Jana had made this video in New York where it was like a takeoff on when unhoused people on the subway say like, hello, my name is such and such and I need money, but here's my bucket, you know. And Jana did it, but she was like, I need a date. She was like, I have not dated in many months and I will take any suggestions. If you have a cousin, if you have a, and she's like, this is not a green card thing. This is just, and it was so funny, but it was so heartfelt. And then it was also so like brave, not to use that word because I hate that word. I remember just thinking like, you can't not root for her. Like you just can't not root for this woman. And so it translated so well to the character that we had created, and like seeing her have so much chemistry with Ed in the room and just really kind of attack the job of being the writer. It just was, I don't know, it was so wonderful once we saw you audition to be like, oh my god, it's gonna work, this is gonna work. Like you're just so happy to find someone who can make it work. And it was really, and then it was like, well, screen test to see, you know, chemistry read with Josh or chemistry read with Ed. And it just always, she just kept winning. It was crazy. We were like, well, eventually, you know, is this going to keep working? And then it just always did.
I would love to have somebody speak so highly of me on tape, and I would just run it on a
Yeah,
loop
I'm
all
just
day long.
reporting the
How
news. It
fantastic!
really is.
That's
Love it, but it's just, it's too much. It's too much.
that's wonderful. What was it like in the writers' room? Now you have a half the writing team are native people, which is I assume very rare or never happened before, and then you're also getting to tell your character's journey, so you're getting to put in I'm sure some personal elements in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I'm still having a hard time sort of processing it because it was like such a big deal in my life, like just personally, uh, um, the opportunities. I mean, everybody in the room, it was such a warm room. It was such a loving room. It was just like people who were excited to be there, excited to tell this story. Um, you know, I've never professionally worked and collaborated with that many native people in like especially creatively, like when I'm in my element and doing something that I know I can do, and that I'm like I just felt like we were all very much thriving with each other and collaborating with each other. We had a great time, and we got cut off halfway through the process because of COVID-19. And so, you know, what started as like sort of a loving room of friends became like really like a, for me at least, a really important like group of supporting like family. Like it felt like we needed each other at that time, and we really showed up for each other, and we continued to work on the show despite all of the things that were happening in our lives and politically. And And, you know, we found laughter together, which I think is really important for Native people, especially to be able to find joy in all of the hardship that we experience. And so that was just like, I mean, I'm still in touch with everyone and love everyone so much. And I just cannot, I pray every day that we get a season 2 just so that I can be with the writing team again. But yeah, and then, you know, I wish I could say that like I had like I can't, I still am having a hard time processing like the transition from being a writer to a performer, because really the role of Regan was an amalgamation of you know, all of the women's and native people's experiences. And so she really sort of has this persona that is not far from who I am. Just kind of like a sweaty, anxious but ambitious you know, go-getter. And also the culture on set was very, again, warm and loving, and being able to like work with Ed and Michael Grey specifically, these two like iconic performers. I just realized very quickly, like, they're not only iconic because they're amazing performers, but they're also just wonderful people to perform with, and they create an environment in the scene work that makes it so available. They made it so available to me to like play and explore, and they encouraged me and helped me process what we were doing, and were just like championing me in a way that I didn't really expect. I sort of was expecting to go in and be like, okay, I'm just gonna fake it till I make it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna pretend like I do. But they were all, you know, everyone was just so cool. And Sierra was on set, you know, every day with me, because we couldn't have episodic writers because of COVID-19 come on set. So Sierra was like my ride or die, and she was the person coming in at every scene, helping me try it different ways and telling me what happened with Regan before and what happens after, and sort of helping me go through, you know, understand the flow of Regan's arc. And so, I mean, it truly felt like the most magical collaboration at every step of the way during this entire process, and just hope we get to do it more and again.
So one of the things we discussed a little bit earlier was how funny, you know, the comedy, it's so funny. It had to be in the challenge to find the right tone, so you can go between the comedy and the more serious aspects of the show. You know, how did that develop? How did you arrive on that?
Well, we have very funny writers. I mean, our writers are very, very funny. They come from different backgrounds and they're funny in different ways. We made a point to never punch down. So we always wanted to make sure that like specifically Indigenous people were always in on the joke, but that also as we were making fun or making comedy, that it just never punched down to any of the characters, you know. And then also really I find that in writers' rooms, there's always this adage of like funniest joke wins, and then oftentimes like something political will happen and it's not always that, or people will overthink. But really, I mean, you put a bunch of funny people in a room, you give them a bunch of Doritos and Coke Zero, like you make funny stuff, and if it makes you laugh, you put it in and you see if it's funny at the table, and if it is, then you keep it, you know. And on the day if it doesn't work, you have funny people, funny actors and writers like Mike and or Ed and Jana and myself who pitch on it. Like it feels weird to be like make it seem just like a job, but there is a tactile sort of feeling of like, oh, I know when this is working, and you know when it's bombing, like you know when it's not working, and so then you change it up and you fix it, you know. And Ed is incredible at that, I will say, where he can really zone in after rehearsal and just be like, this isn't working and this isn't working, these are my pitches. Like he will actually pitch fixes and jokes, and not just for his character, but for other characters. And so it's like this sort of kind of communal potluck of ideas, but you kind of know when it's not working, and you do your best to fix it. And then you just keep moving, you know? But yeah, that to us was the thing. I think as women of color, like we know what it feels like to feel like the butt of a joke. And like we just didn't want to ever feel that way. So we made sure not to. But we also are funny and love to laugh and love to cut up and tease. So it's like it's great to have a woman like Jana who can like get made fun of by Wayne and Sally's characters, you know, like, and take it because she loves comedy as much as everyone else, but at the same time, make it so that it's not punching down.
Doing this as a comedy allows you to say a lot more in much less time than I think in a drama. What freedoms does that give you?
I think it disarms the viewer who, I think that, and Jana has said this before, that non-native audiences are very willing to sort of consume our trauma. Like that they, you know, we had so many native actresses on the show that said like, oh, it's just so nice to play a role where you live at the end of the episode. And you're just like, Jesus. And it's dark and it's real. And so to sort of sidestep some of that and not ignore trauma, not ignore, I mean, we talk about stuff, you know, we talk about repatriation, we talk about certain issues that affect Native people. We don't shy from that stuff. However, I think it disarms the viewer to see it presented to them as a comedy, because that is inviting and you can't help but want to hear more or be more curious about what else you're going to see, versus the sort of like rote, I'm expecting this trauma to be presented to me and I consume it and I know what this feels like. To me, this is like a different experience. And I think it made it almost easier to talk about some of those issues and some of those feelings. And really, it's like, you know, the adage of like show don't tell. I think that with Native people, a lot of times people are, and because the stuff is made by non-Native people, they're telling you how we feel versus showing you what that experience is like.
So besides Regan, which character did you enjoy writing for most?
Oh my God. I love all of them. I love all of them. I love writing for Bobby. Just knowing you have this like assassin that can come in and just burn people, but also has like, is so like winning and wants to be a grown up, you know. I love writing for Nathan. I love that sort of blind spot, good naturedness, and sort of his inability to kind of see reality. It's just such a funny kind of construction. And then those Michael Gray's monologues, I mean, we had so much fun crafting those and really giving him those moments. Mike sure was like, I want Terry to have a monologue every episode. And we were like, I love montages and Mike hates montages and he loves monologues, and he wanted him to have a monologue every episode. And then when we met Michael and he auditioned, we we're like, well, I guess he can have a monologue every episode because that guy can do that. So yeah, I think everyone kind of came with their own sort of like secret power or something. And it's always kind of fun to write for each of them.
So you have this amazing cast and you get to be thrown in the middle and pretty much work with all of them for the most part, it seems. What's it like? It must be a dream come true, first of all, but what's the experience like on set?
Listen, it was a dream come true to work with Ed Helms, like, period. I grew up watching Ed Helms and just loving Ed Helms' entire, you know, body of work. Huge fan. And also Michael Grey Eyes. I grew up watching Michael Grey Eyes. Like he's our native Tom Cruise. I don't know. He's our is he a Tom Cruise? I think he's more maybe a
a little Patrick Swayze, I think,
Patrick
like
Swayze.
the dance element and the romance. Like, I'm into it.
Yeah, he's like just been in so many Native specific shows, and so coming into that experience was just like so exciting for me, and getting to work with them. And I really like, it was one of those things where I was like, this is going to be like the professional challenge of my life, and I'm ready. Like I was like ready to step into it, and I was just like so grateful that I had like done so many years doing improv comedy and sketch comedy and like knew how to perform, and just like I just was like, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I didn't really realize at the time that I would also get to like do scene work with Beth Stelling and Paul F. Tompkins and Geraldine Keams, like even the Native actors who came on and did stuff, like those were some of the funnest scenes to do. And I wish that we had like an outtakes reel, because there were just like endless takes that we would do that were just cracking us all up. I mean,
getting Geraldine Keams to improv was like the most fun, because when she says, you know, it's your fault. Ray married a white woman, her character. And Michael kept going, what else? What else? And she just kept being like, look at your makeup. And you're like, talk about her makeup. And she would just be like, oh, and she would just go on and on. And Jana just holding it. And then we just burst out laughing. But she had so many burns for you that we didn't anticipate.
I know. Oh God, it was just truly like method acting. I don't know. But yeah, like Jesse was so fun to work with, and Dustin is like truly the like wokest, most like kind person that I could have ever imagined. Every single person, there wasn't an asshole in the bunch. I don't know. Like, I guess I kind of expected, yeah, like I expected that there would be like some harder personalities maybe popping on, but like not a single person wasn't just enjoying the process. And I think also there was an element because of COVID-19 that it was like very much like, hey, we got to get in here, do our thing, do our best, and like execute and like support each other and just be patient about all of the things and so yeah, that culture felt real on set. And you know, even the crew were so wonderful, the directors were so wonderful, and everybody has been reaching out and telling me like, I had so much fun on Rutherford, you know, people, you know, PAs, like everybody who had a part in this process, like just really enjoyed being a part of it. And so did I.
What do you think will surprise people most about the series?
I think that in my opinion, something that I think people are being surprised at is how much sort of like land back rhetoric is happening with our show. Like we're sort of presenting some you know, deeper like land reclamation topics and, you know, tribal law. We're treading into some, you know, some really important issues on the show that you know, it's not just Regan trying to get items for her museum. There is a kind of a bigger conversation, which is, you know, how can we imagine a world where Native people are centering ourselves in our own history and in the history of this country, and we're, you know, we're really taking up space in Rutherford Falls. So you know, I think people expect for a Mike Schur comedy that it's going to be like, you know, great jokes and fun characters, and I think people are coming for that, and then they're staying for the sort of cultural commentary that's being provided.
And I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I grew up on television. I love television so much, and I never really considered not seeing myself on screen because I just was so, I don't know, drunk on the stories and intoxicated by the stories and that sort of thing. But it's been really overwhelming to see on Twitter not just Native people, but Native people saying, "Oh my God, I am Regan. My uncle is Terry. My husband is Terry. My sister is Regan." Like that they really feel like they're seeing themselves on screen, and the power of that has been really overwhelming. And I've seen it, you know, non-binary folks saying, oh my gosh, there's a non-binary actor playing a non-binary character, and they're just non-binary. They don't, you know, it's not the sort of crux of that person's, you know, trauma. They just get to live their lives. I've seen it happen with white viewers saying like, oh, it's interesting to see people have these conversations and I don't feel like I'm the worst person in the world in the show. I've seen it with, I mean, just multiple different types of people. It's been really fascinating to see people watch themselves on screen, and the power of that has been, I think, more overwhelming than I anticipated because I did not go in necessarily with that goal. But that's been surprising.
So my daughter was telling me, or heard me talking about doing this interview, and she heard me speaking with my wife, and she said, "Oh, you know, can I see these people you're interviewing?" I was like, "Why?" You know, I was thinking, did she see the trailer or the show? Maybe she's familiar. And she said, "No, I've never seen a Native American on television before, only in history books. What are the next steps for change? You know, what do you see happening, or what can we do?"
Well, I mean, I'll start. You can. Okay. There was an exhibit at the National Museum of the American Indian, which was you walked this hallway, and it was these sort of projections of different types of Native people, all different types, and it said, wherever you walk, wherever you go, there's probably a Native person. So your daughter probably did see a Native person on screen, or has interacted with Native people and just didn't know it. And I think that that's sort of really that's really the rub is we've always been here, and we've always participated in society, and we've always participated in government, and NASA, and all different walks of life. And it's really about the sort of seeing us and acknowledging us and listening to us. And so part of that in terms of representation is just more. We always say, like, Rutherford Falls isn't the Native experience, it is a Native experience based on these 5 Native writers that are on the show. And so, like, Reservation Dogs is coming, Sterling Harjo's show, that is going to be a very different show, but I'm so excited to see it, like, as a viewer. And there's a Marvel show coming out that has Native content. There's a lot of Sovereign is a show that was sold to NBC that hopefully will be made, that's sort of like a Native kind of Queen Sugar. And so to me, the change comes from us getting to do this again and again and again, and more, because I think the more versions of us you get to see, the less surprising it is, the more sort of ingrained. Because we always say, like, we knew Native people were funny, like, we knew these stories. It's really the change comes in everyone getting to know them.
I was just gonna add to that and say, like, I think what helps that process along is for us to have for our voices to be heard, in educational spaces, in political spaces, and in media spaces, and these, like, kind of primary locuses, these environments where we're erased, more widely. And that requires people to go out of their way to consume Native literature and consume journalism by Native people. I mean, I would love to get to a point where we have Native people who are, TV critics, and that, and not just for Native content, and I would love people to be buying Native jewelry just to buy it, to wear it, not because it's a Native show, or I think that there's, like, in order for us to have more and to really thrive in this industry, we need Native people in producer positions. We need Native people to have the ability to excel in this industry, and to, like, sort of climb the ladder and be content creators. We need the autonomy. We need the storytelling autonomy. Essentially, we need to be, like, the master of the story. And I had this conversation with Ava DuVernay. Amazingly, got the opportunity to talk to her about Queen Sugar and some of her content. And I asked her, what is a trope that you would like to not see ever again in terms of, Black and Indigenous content? And she said, I would like the trope of the Renaissance to go away. I don't want us to continue to have these renaissances, or be described as having a renaissance, because that implies that we are, having a moment, or that we are, we're having this, like, surge of amazing content. But the reality is we're continuously making amazing content. It just isn't getting funding. It just isn't getting attention. And so we need to have, like, multiple Native shows on all the networks. We need to be seen that much for it to not feel like a renaissance. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I probably didn't phrase my question, it wasn't really, it was just more of an observation, with my daughter. And
no judgments. Like, your daughter is reflective of, like, everyone. Like, it's not anything that is, like, I don't know how to say this. Systemically, we are not included in so many ways that like, that is not the first time I've heard that. That is not the first time I've felt that as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, seeing myself and not seeing myself in history books, or getting, a 1-2 day kind of explanation of something, of all Indigenous history of over 500 tribes, so it's not anything, I don't know how to say this. It's not anything where I'm judging. It's more just like, that is the nature of our experience very often.
I think, even as someone who watches a lot of television, I thought, well, it's true. Where are where are Native people represented in a way that's not something like you said, oh, I've seen this character in 5 other shows, but that's what I love about Rutherford Falls is that there are so many different characters and they're not all painted with the same brush. It's and especially since there's so many different nations, and it's great to see. So I'm going to finish up with my usual annoying question that people hate, but I love to ask. What are 3 words that you would use to describe Rutherford Falls?
Is it collectively between the 2 of us 3
You
words?
want, should we like
No, no.
sidebar and like get in the
I'd
chat?
prefer 2 separate answers if possible.
All right.
People have cheated before, so I'll accept.
Funny. I would say funny. I would say indigenous, and I would say kind.
I would say soulful, challenging, and I don't know, hilarious. Another word for funny. Sorry.
But I
It
don't
works.
think I want to lose sight of the fact that this is a comedy. Like we are trying to make a comedy, we're trying to make people laugh.
Yes.
Is there anything I didn't bring up that you'd love to talk about or that people don't ask enough about?
The end of
30
my
seconds.
card for booth fee, no one ever sees it because it's on streaming, but it's my mom saying Nijani Chiaja, which means like good job, baby. And I was like, I gotcha. Like now I put it at the end of everything I do.